I couldn't have done this without celebration. I wouldn't be here telling this story but for your program, your guidance, and your insight. And I will tell you, I found you based on a recommendation from one of my partners who also sat later in his career and said, this is the guy you got to use. You've got our support and our endorsement. And thank you for helping me achieve this opportunity.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. And today we have a wonderful story for you from Florida, where we have somebody who had an interesting journey, but he's got some great news to share. John, welcome to the show. And what is your good news?
Thank you, Jackson. My good news is that I successfully passed the bar in July after a hiccup in February.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the hiccup in February because that's really the core of this story in some ways. Now, you're already licensed. You've been practicing law for quite a while, right?
I first passed a bar exam in 1980, and I've been practicing almost 45 years now.
And what jurisdictions are you licensed in before Florida?
I was initially passed in DC. I then was admitted to New York on motion, and then I sat in New Jersey in 1990. And I thought 10 years out of law school, this should be it. I shouldn't be sitting for any more bar exams. But fast forward some 34 years, and there I was teed up in Florida for the Florida bar, again, first in February, and then again in July of 2024.
Yeah. And for the people in our audience that don't know, Florida requires that no matter how long you've been licensed, no matter what accomplishments you've had, and you are a very accomplished lawyer, that you have to go through the entire process again, correct?
That's right. And I almost don't fault. They're being very protective of their homegrown profession. And they don't want guys like me just showing up at the 11th hour, throwing out a shingle and saturating the market with a bunch of Yankees.
And in fact, we call it Yankee Go Home.
And we do,
in Florida.
don't we?
And you really experienced that, didn't you? They smacked you pretty good.
They did. And so we might as well cut to the chase and get to the punchline. I sat in February, and having successfully handwritten 2 bar exams in the past, and being of a certain age that I was deathly afraid of what might happen with technology, I chose to handwrite my essays in Florida in February.
And what happened?
And about 2 weeks before, scratched my chin and said, I may have made a tactical error. And I was fairly prescient because when I got my results on April 15th, I literally got a 0 on one of my essays. And I shared
I want to talk about that because you don't see a 0 score very often, and you certainly don't expect to see it from a licensed attorney and somebody that we know has the capacity and capability. And so you sent me your essay, and you remember what I said to you about it?
Exactly. Completely illegible. They take 5 minutes to read it, and if it's going to take more than that, they'll give you the goose egg and move on to the next guy. I will also tell you, Jackson, I remember you saying in one of the very, very early lectures to type the essays, don't handwrite them, don't give them an opportunity to whack you. And I wasn't completely confident in my ability to get through the session with a computer. And I rolled the dice and came up snake eyes. You were kind enough to look at my exam and let me know that substantively I was okay. I had the substance down, but it didn't do me any good because nobody could read it.
Yeah, and that's really what we wanted to focus on today. And this is not obviously to beat you up because we're really excited that you passed, but I think it's an incredibly important lesson for people who are worried about the technology, about bringing a computer into the testing center and things that could go wrong and type and uploading your answers and doing all of that. And those are all legitimate concerns. Those things do happen, but they don't happen so often anymore as to justify the risk that you take when you handwrite. And when I read your essay, the 0-point essay, it wasn't a 0-point essay. It had content, it had substance, But I remember looking at the paper and turning it this way and turning it this way and trying to look at it and taking my glasses off. And the examiners just weren't going to do that. And so they did, as you said, they just gave you a zero. And and I remember saying to you at that point, and I think it's still true, they were sending you a message. They could have given you 5 points or 10 points or 15 points. The zero was a very clear message, which was do not handwrite your essays. And I know that there are people out there in our audience who are going to be watching this saying, oh, you don't understand. I'm not a fast typist or a good typist. That really wasn't the point, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was probably more my age than anything else, just being
Yeah.
intimidated by the
Yeah.
technology. And the sense of confidence I think I had as well from having handwritten my essays twice before successfully. And I think the lesson I would share with your audience, Jackson, is despite what they say about your choice to handwrite or type away. They're not going to be able to not read. I know that's double negatives, but you'll have something down on paper. And I will also add again, from my perspective, I was stunned at how easy it was to upload the answers after the exam, which was another challenge for me. Welcome to the 21st century. Do it on computer. Have some faith in the technology. And I will also say, having sat through 2 sessions in Florida, there's a pretty good team in the room. And I think if an applicant, an exam taker, were to encounter any kind of difficulties, there are people who are going to be there immediately to help. And you won't be on an island trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, this is really an interesting point. We interviewed a representative of the National Conference of Bar Examiners, and we asked her about California's plan to go to at-home testing. And her response to that was precisely what you just said. When you're in a test center, a big center like Tampa for Florida or some of these other places around the country, there are people there to help you if something goes wrong. If you're sitting at home and something goes wrong, it's a different story. But Tampa, for all of the craziness, and there's certainly plenty, there are people there to help you. And so I think getting past that hurdle psychologically and just experientially of knowing that, oh, I really can type on the computer and it's going to be okay and it's going to work. To cut back to our story, here you get your results in February and you're stunned, I think, because you can
Yes.
pass a bar exam, you knew the material, and then you get this crazy zero, which just blows you up completely on the bar exam. And so then you have to go back and re-study and resit for the exam. And I want to talk just a little bit about what that was like emotionally, because I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. It's embarrassing when you're not successful at an exam like that. What was it like for you to reset yourself and say, all right, I'm going to type and I'm going to study and I'm going to go at it again?
So I think it was easier than I expected. And I just
Okay.
jumped right back into it. Now,
Yeah.
I will say part of my motivation was that I had been in conversations with my firm to be the attorney to help open an office in Florida. So it wasn't
Right.
just for my own benefit. The firm had, rightly or wrongly, hung its star on me to carry the flag. And I felt a sense of obligation to my firm. They had been so supportive of me. And I think that helped motivate me as well. But I got right back on the horse. I took one of the things you told me I could increase the playback a little bit. So that was one of the liberties I took. But otherwise, I went all the way through the course program all over again and committed myself to the entire process. And no regrets, no regrets about having made that level of commitment up to the process. Obviously, it worked out for the good. I passed and
Yeah.
I was particularly elated that day. And as I've told, it helped me get through the first one because you told me you know the stuff, the substance is there. So this time I had the benefit of knowing that I had captured the substance. On the flip side, I also had the experience of knowing I had failed. So that risk was still hovering. And I think that helped motivate me as well. but it was pretty easy for me to just step right back into the lineup and get going.
That's great. And you took our basic course. You just did what we asked you to do, correct?
I think, yes, I did. And again, the benefit of having done it in February as I approached July was knowing that what I got from the basic course was more than enough to get me through substantively. And I felt, I think I wrote to you after February, I felt completely prepared and I felt like I had been able to manage substantively the process. I felt the same way in July. And I think the results of both exams bear that foundation that your course was more than enough for me to get through the exam.
Would you recommend Celebration Bar Review to somebody taking the exam?
I
Yeah.
already have.
Thank you.
I ran into, to show you my age, the grandson of one of my clients sat for the Florida bar in July with me. And I
Oh,
saw
wow.
him. He didn't succeed. And I said,
Good.
celebration, buddy. Go do celebration. I felt it served me so well. I was very candid. I told him about both experiences and told him that substantively I felt prepared. And he too, he's not quite as old as I am, but I think he said he'd been out 10 years. He'd been practicing in New York for 10 years. So
Mhm.
one of the issues we have is juggling our time. And unlike me, he also has a young family. So that's
Hmm.
3 tugs on his day. And I think the way your program is set up, it's really conducive for the for people who are busy, and especially people with some experience who are focused and motivated. I think you cut to the when you talk about Jackson wanting things to wash over the exam takers as opposed to memorizing and creating mnemonics. I think that works a lot better with seasoned attorneys because we're used to doing that in our practices, right?
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
memorizing case law or statutes.
No.
We're understanding what the law is,
Yeah.
absorbing it, and crafting an appropriate response to a situation based on what we've absorbed through X number of years of practice. So I
Yeah.
have,
And I'm glad you talked about the time pressures because I think people sometimes get amnesia about the amount of effort it takes to study for the bar exam, right?
Yep.
We think back, particularly those of us that got licensed maybe decades ago,
many,
you just forget how much work it is. And when you've got to practice or practice in a family or practice in community commitments, and you add studying for the bar, that is a big challenge, isn't it?
it is. And again, I was fortunate the same way this opportunity to open the office in Florida presented itself because of my station in life was also at a good point. My kids are grown. They're living remotely from me on my own. I don't have that family demand, though I did have a very supportive girlfriend, now fiance, who helped me through the whole process. But it it's real easy to think I don't have to work that hard at this. If I show up, all I need is a couple of weeks. Yeah, get in the game, start doing it, start managing your time. And my goal had been to finish all of your lecture at least 10 days before the exam. So that last week before the exam was review, practice, working on my typing skills, and really not seeing material for the first time. And I will credit you. I think the practice exams really, especially for somebody like me who hasn't taken an exam, and I finished. So the last exam I took was the New Jersey bar. I did that right after I finished my LLM at NYU in 89. So 89, 90. But the last time I took it, so for me to get back into exam mode was a chore unto itself.
Yeah. It takes a lot of perseverance and courage because we take the risk, of course, of what's going to happen here. And one of the things that I admire so much about you, John, is that when we had that February conference and you weren't defensive or resistant, you just went, yep, That's what happened. Okay, let's go. And that's also the sign of a good attorney, right? Because we know that we don't always win and things don't always go our way. And we have to get back into the office the next day and get up in there and do our work. And that's what you did. And you were no drama. You just went about your work. And I knew that you were working at it and staying consistent. So it was no surprise when you passed in July, but it was a wonderful feeling. And I know for you, it had to be very much a relief, but also just a, I did it.
So absolutely. I was thrilled. And one of the things, talk about amnesia. I forgot about how excited I would be to find out I passed the bar. There's something about that. Look what I did. There's a true sense of accomplishment. So one of the things I'll add to this is, I don't know if you recall this, but I originally had signed up for your program for the July 2023 exam, but I suffered a retina
Right.
detachment and I
That's
had
right.
to kick July to February.
That's right.
And I had that February experience. And then I took it in July. The very same day I found out I passed this bar, I found out I had a detached retina in the other eye. So I
Oh my
went
gosh.
from, holy Christ, here we go again. I got a detached retina to, "Whew, I passed the bar." And I'll get around to celebrating after I get through this recovery on my eye.
Yeah,
Yep.
you have recovered
Yes.
and you look
And my
great.
my bar experiences have been bookended by my retina experiences.
Isn't that something? I'm so glad that you're recovering. I struggle with some of those same eye issues, so I know how challenging and debilitating that can be. But I'm just delighted that you're back and doing well. So are you going to relocate to Florida then?
I have. In anticipation of all of this, I sold my home in New Jersey. I bought a home here in Naples.
Oh, great.
Signed back and forth, but I am a Florida resident, Florida driver's license, Florida vote, Florida
There you
everything.
go.
And I'm committed to Florida at this point.
Yeah, it's a great place to live, and we're delighted that you are down there. I am just so pleased for you, John. I know that this has been a bit of an odyssey and probably not what you expected when you first thought, well, okay, we'll just do this. But here we are. And I know that your story will inspire and encourage a lot of people, particularly those who are already licensed in other locations, and help them realize that no matter how old we are or how many experiences we have, you've got to treat the bar exam in 2025 as a different animal, right?
You take nothing for granted
Yeah.
and commit yourself as if this were the summer after you graduated law school and it's your first shot at a bar. And, all the pressure associated with that first job. I don't think you can change your mentality and wave from that. You don't have to be quite as frenetic as we were the first time out. I think
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
experience of having successfully passed a bar helps, but don't take it for granted or treat it lightly because it will come back to bite you. I studied every bit as hard the first time as I did the second time, and I'm glad I did. And even that was no guarantee the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. John, I'm proud of you. I'm delighted for you. I look forward to you having a wonderful opportunity there in Naples. And we're glad that we could be part of the journey. Thank you so much for sharing the story and for recommending us to others.
And Jackson, this is not hyperbole. I couldn't have done this without celebration. I wouldn't be here telling this story but for your program, your guidance, and your insight. And I will tell you, I found you based on a recommendation from one of my partners who also sat later in his career and said, "This is the guy you got to use. You've got our support and
Thank you.
our endorsement. And thank you for helping me achieve this opportunity."
It was my pleasure for sure. Please stay in touch. Thank you again. And I know that many people in our audience will go, oh, okay.
Oh, that's it. Look for this face.
That's right. Good
Thank you,
talking to you.
Jackson.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.